Thanks for joining, everyone. Let me pull up my notes on the side. Feel free to shoot any questions in the chat about what I'm talking about. I'll be reading it and addressing things. But yeah, I guess where's a good place to start? I think what we'll do is just do a full listen through of the track. It's called Surrender. It's coming out tomorrow, assuming all the DistroKid is doing their job and pushing it out to all the streaming services at the correct time. But yeah, I think I'll leave it at that for now. We'll listen through and I'll come back and kind of talk about the inspiration of the track, all that jazz. And I guess one other note before getting started, you'll see the name Acceptance on a lot of these. That was the working title, but it is called Surrender. So I'm going to start playing the track and let me know if there's any audio problems. Should be in stereo, all that jazz. Yeah, enjoy.
Accepting what is.
Woohoo! Sweet. Well, there it is. Thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate it a lot. There's a lot of history behind this track. So I'll kind of get into that with kind of what the track is about. If you didn't really pick it up, it's kind of like, I guess the working title is probably a really good summary. It's about acceptance. And essentially, this track, as you'll kind of see, is the dates that I've written down here. I started this in 2021. And obviously, that was in the middle of COVID. And was feeling down, and like something that happened over COVID, and something that like is like a day-to-day thing for me is experiencing like tension headaches. And that was just kind of a thing that I think my body decided to manifest stress in that manner. So the track is mostly kind of about the idea of letting go of control, like accepting that, hey, there are some things that are, if you like just let go of control of it and you just say, all right, this is a thing I have to deal with. It's something that is going to be, it's not just going to magically go away. For example, COVID, all that jazz. So let's just kind of accept that this is where things are, and then go from there. What can you do from that point? And so the track is kind of about that bittersweet sort of duality between the like freedom and sort of strength and like warm comfort of letting go, like the how that it's like it's two sides of the same coin. It's like, yes, we're free, we're letting go of control, but I love control. I'm kind of a perfectionist. I love having all these things. I want to be able to, not have to deal with COVID. And so that's kind of the thing. And that's where I find a lot of inspiration and energy for writing tracks, is exploring concepts of balance and contrast, not only with the sound of things, but in the theme of the track. So yeah, I don't know if I could ever just write up a straight up banger or just a straight up ambient track, because I love having the combination of both things. So that's kind of where things were coming from. And it was a long journey. It was 2021. I think this track is also kind of like a good milestone for me, because there was a conscious shift over COVID of where I tried to change my workflow with writing music, to push it into a manner that was more healthy for me, because couple years ago, I was all about writing sort of like complicated music that has a lot of detail, that requires a lot of time and effort and a lot of tweaking. And I would have fun doing that. But at a certain point, it would be so much cognitive load and so much time to finish a track that it just wasn't that fun. And I would get burnt out. Because things would kind of end up feeling like work, because I would work on a track for so long. It would be really hard to unhear it and come at it fresh. So this is a track from that era, where it was started in that era, and worked over it like sporadically over the past couple of years into this new area where I feel like most of the tracks that I've made under this name Safco have been essentially that new era, where it's kind of like trying to embody Kiss, to keep it simple, stupid, but this track comes from that area. So there was a lot of tension trying to finish this, because this was such a meaningful track and special track for me that I was like, I have to finish this and have to put it out. But it was such a huge task to try and finish it because there are so many moving parts to it. And there were a lot of points where it's like, oh, it's missing something. I can't just quite get it where I want it. But I feel like I was able to wrestle it into that direction. So like a lot of what I'm going to talk about are things that I'm going to like, I definitely want to try avoid because it's so much friction and so much work to try and get something like this finished because of how complicated it was. But I think it's probably important to kind of talk about it and document it and why it's difficult to get things where it was. And I think it'll be apparent by all the changes I've made. And I think it makes an interesting story because this track started one place, it ended up another, and help from someone in chat, Eve, contributed some to it that kind of unlocked finishing it up. But yeah, so I guess with that being said, what I'm going to do is kind of go over some of these bounces of the track from older versions of the project and just kind of show you where it started and where the direction it went in, because I think I find this interesting. Not a lot of people do this in their track breakdowns, but I think it's kind of interesting to see how people evolve their ideas over time. So I'm not going to play every single one all the way out. I'm just going to point out some specific things. But yeah, so obviously the first couple ones are going to sound really rough and really different. But yeah, that's part of the fun, It kind of annoys me when I see someone doing a track breakdown and they only show the finished product with all the polish on it. And I think it's kind of humanizing to be like, all right, this is where it started. It's kind of like, this sounds awful, but every track is going to start sounding awful. So that being said, after gassing myself up and having high expectations for what this is going to sound like, we'll see. I'm just going to talk over it as well. But let me know if there's any weird audio stuff. And this is another part that is from that quote unquote old era of me where I loved using piano. I still do. But yeah, this chord progression is what I started with, which is like, oh, I love that sort of bittersweet nature. But then here things kind of diverge from the final idea a little bit, where essentially there's a lot of chords going on. I think I basically started with the chord progression going twice as fast as I settled it on. And then it kind of goes on. So the one thing that kind of retained was the chord progression and then the vocals, but everything else was kind of different. So it was kind of refreshing for me to go back and listen through this and be like, oh, so that's what this was. And often when I'm working on a project and I'm exploring a variation of the idea, I'll just put a bunch of silence in between that new idea to kind of figure out to say, all right, this isn't part of the arrangement yet, but I have this idea. I don't remember exactly what this is, but we'll see. Yeah, that sounds pretty bad, but that's part of my process, is to try and, do the, I really like the expression to write drunk, edit sober, where when you're in the creative mode, just throw everything out there at the wall. Some things will stick, and come back at a different point with kind of an editing mode where you're like, all right, what are the good bits of this? And this was not the good bit. Let's see. Do I have any other notes for this particular thing? No. Cool. So this is a variation of it. And if you're interested as to why I said C and K, this was Camo and Crooked meant to reference them, which is a group that I really like, inspired by. This is a lot closer to the final product. I'm just going to skip through. So this is where the idea is really kind of coming together. I can skip to the drop, see what it sounds like. So it's getting closer. I got more of that rhythm. There's some plugins missing, so some of it sounds a little weird. And then more ideas I threw out here. I think this idea I ended up not sticking with. But yeah, at this point, the track is kind of more of a low energy, not low energy, but like, you know, not kind of like a huge swell of emotions. It's kind of like, you know, a little bit more consistent in energy. Oh, and I should say, I either started in January and then didn't really touch it until over a year later. And I think this is probably going to be about the same as before. But I think I merged the gap. Some more ideas. Yeah, so that's when I kind of found the vocal, because I always like to have some sort of spoken word vocal in my tracks. And then this next bounce is basically where things really come together. Things are a lot more unified. It's probably a lot of the same, but I think I added a lot more elements. It's a little bit more polished. So the heart is there of the final track. We can A-B. Let's listen to the finished one. Oops. Where's the drop? It is here. So there's a big difference. Like the idea is there, but it's still kind of that lower energy, and a lot of the steps past this point where like, all right, I actually want this to be a little bit more emotional, the sort of that swelling up and this bigger release. And that's kind of where a lot of the polish kind of comes from later down the road. And let's see, do I have any other notes, things I wanted to cover for this specific version? I don't think so. So some variation. And here I don't have any drums, but this was a period where doing sort of a quote unquote techno section drum and bass was really popping off. So I was experimenting with that. But yeah, good question, Jasmine. So do you mean the elements to kind of bring the energy up and have that sort of release? There's probably going to be a second or so delay between what I'm saying in chat. So forgive me if I'm silent for a second. Okay, cool. Yeah. So when I open up the project file, I'll show you. But basically, it's just kind of like a lot of filler elements. Like normally when I'm producing, I save like all the sparkle and filling in the gaps later. Cool, got my first spam. Let's go. And so essentially I'm focused on the most obvious elements first. And so when I get to the end, I will come back and be like, all right, I need some sort of transitional element like a riser, whether it be white noise or like a sound that starts low and pitches up, or something that fills in the gap. And so at that point, I normally just kind of pick elements that fill out the frequency ranges or wherever, or in stereo as well, that are not yet occupied. So At this example, I don't think I really had any crash or white noise or sound effects or whatever going on the drop. So we can A/B it. Yeah, it's just completely dry when you get to the drop. And with the finished version, I have more things kind of swelling up, more risers, white noise. I like to use Foley as well. So like sound recording that has a natural sound to it that I can pitch up or pitch down or fill, high pass as it goes higher, whatever, add reverb. And so this is kind of what you'll hear on the finished version. More the rising up. And then from there, just kind of like a dispersion of different sounds and things going on. And I'll open up the project and I can show you specifically what that translated to. But I think at the end of the day, it was probably just like a clap sample with a reverb and, a lot of EQing and things. So that way it basically fleshes out the gaps of where things aren't already are, because I don't want it to fight with the main elements. It's just meant to be the extra sauce. And I find that you could like really elevate the perceived energy level of a track by doing something like that. Because as I just showed, if you don't have that, things kind of seems kind of static, and tracks are fine like that. I like a lot of minimal music or music that necessarily doesn't have a huge contrast and energy. But for this track, I was like, it needs it. So I ended up adding that back. So at this point, you'll hear more about me talking about this, where my friend Eve contributed a recording of herself that I ended up using in the final version. But essentially, that gave me the idea to flesh out the second drop and what I wanted that to sound like, because I was throwing a lot of ideas out there, and here's kind of the first iteration. So I still like that, but it is also missing exactly what I was just saying before, the sort of perceived, swelling and like high energy level. So from there to the finished one, it's more so pushing that, and I'll just go directly there on the finished track. So there's a lot of extra layers and stuff I added, but essentially that was one problems that I got stuck on, was the energy of the first drop was so high and so in your face. And then the second one was a lot lower, and I liked what they were both doing. But the part of me was like, all right, well, do I switch the order? Do I put this lower energy one first and then try and ramp up the energy to the second drop? Because as it was in this state, it was like, all right, I have to do work to transition that energy level from something high to something lower. Otherwise, it's really jarring to be like, all right, I have this like really intense and wall of sound, and then suddenly shift the vibe. And sometimes that works, but that's something that you just kind of have to feel out for yourself, as opposed to it just. Yeah, you just kind of have to vibe it out. It's one of those things that you get an ear for. And you'll see by the name of this, I worked on this track and I had COVID. So it's been a big, been through a lot while writing this. And let's see, I think at this point, everything was pretty fleshed out. I think I added some more stuff to the second drop. So I think I mixed it a little bit more, and worked on it a little bit more. What else? This is the point, a little bit polished, where something was missing. Because at this point, I do have the like ooh and ah vocal sample going on in the intro. But here, I don't have the sung vocal with lyrics yet. And it's like, I feel like without the vocals with lyrics, it works. But in my head, I don't know if I was just getting too much in my head and being like, oh, I feel like we need something more as added interest here, because the whole intro is basically kind of the same melodic idea, just told in slightly different ways, where the timbre of each sound changes over time. But in my head, I'm like, I feel like it's something fresh needs to happen here. So something didn't feel quite so satisfying here. And I actually had a completely different B section on the second drop compared to the final version. So I'll just show you the final version real quick so you remember it for the B section. And what I had before, which was an idea that actually just never made the cut, was this. Which is cool. But for me, it felt like a similar mismatch in energy, where it's like, okay, this is cool and it's a hype moment. But for me, I like to try when I'm DJing as well as when I'm making music. I want the arrangement to make sense and there to not be too much jarring difference in energy levels. So for me, I could like make a graph of it. I like to think of things in terms of graphs where things start out really, low energy at the beginning. They gain higher energy and they kind of peak at the drop, and things kind of go down a little bit. And then we have a little bit more energy for the second drop. And then this idea was like probably the most in your face part of it. And that was a little bit jarring to me. And I really wasn't super happy with the sound design because it's pretty harsh and it was missing some of the low end frequencies. So I ended up just kind of throwing it out and just being like, all right, well, I'll just write something new. And that ended up kind of unlocking sort of the final part of writing the drops. And another big thing, which probably doesn't make a huge difference if you're not like a keen drum and bass enjoyer, was for the first drop, I was originally using a clap. And so, yeah, for reference, we'll just go back and forth again. In the final version, I ended up switching to a snare. And that also helped raise the perceived energy level, because the claps are cool. And I really love drum and bass where claps are super stereo, where they're basically not really any mono content, where they're just kind of sitting on the outside of the mix and you're letting the rest of the song take the mono image. But and hence why I also was coming from like a Camo and Crooked direction, because they're kind of really good about writing tracks that have like an interesting syncopated rhythm and claps that sit on the outside of the stereo spectrum. But I was like, oh, I really just, I feel like the energy needs to go higher and I want kind of a heavy snare. And I think that also helped make things more consistent, because for the life of me, I actually do know why. I love snares. And so in my tracks, I usually have like 2 or 3 or 4 different snares that are usually quite different. So it's a little bit more subtle this time, but I'll jump between the sections of the track and you'll hear slight variations in the snare. So there's a snare layered with a clap. Here it's going to be a little bit more tight. And here, I think it should be pretty tight with like a tonal sound to it as well, where there's kind of a ring to it. Anyways, I think, yeah. So that kind of covers the story. And no, it doesn't. The last thing that was different. So I talked about the second drop, and I talked about how I felt like there was something missing here. And that's where I started looking around on Splice for vocal samples, kind of around the theme of the track. And so I think previously I had like the spoken word sample right before the drop. Accepting what is. Very over the head, on the nose theme of the track. And so I found some Splice vocals and I messed around with them, changed the timing and put them in. And I think I kind of swung the pendulum a little bit too far into adding new ideas. And so this is what I ended up with, which was kind of an amalgamation of several different vocal samples pulled together that were thematically related. And I liked it, but it was too much new stuff. So I'll just play that quickly. Oops. Something in the background right now. And it's a really cool vocal. But I didn't want to add too much more complication to the track. So this is the one I kept. So basically the jump from here to now was removing that and a lot of mixing. This track was kind of a nightmare to mix because several reasons. At this point, the project file, you'll see it, I'll open it, and it is a lot of tracks. And it is also drum and bass, which is notorious for having incredibly awesome mix downs. So, listening to reference tracks and stuff, it's it can make you sad because the content that is out there is absolutely amazing, and because it's such a fast tempo, and you have to have an amazing mix for everything to kind of cut through. So at such a fast tempo with fast drums like this, it has to be super tight and clean for everything to kind of translate. So there was a lot of effort in that process. But yeah, so that kind of covers the story of the track and where it got to where it is now today. And now I'm happy to open up the project file. So we're now shifting from, non-technical stuff to definitely more technical stuff. So it's going to take a second to open the project file because it is big. But yeah, while that is happening, were there any questions or things specifically people would want to see in the project file? I plan to talk a little bit about mix master, looking at some of the elements. For example, like looking at the kick, looking at the snare, how I made those. Just kind of dissecting things a little bit. But is there anything specific that chat would like to know or about or hear? Because it depends on how deep y'all want to go. Because I can chat about this type of stuff for ages, but obviously it's such a big project that not everything can be covered in explicit detail. So I'll just hit the most important points. Loading, it's loading. And we are in. Cool. Great. And it's actually, wait, no, it is still a lot of tracks. It's over 200 audio tracks. So that is one reason why it was a nightmare to mix. But yeah, there's one thing. And I was actually kind of blown away. I did a test stream earlier today to make sure I could actually run this project and stream. I can, but it is like getting close to the edge where we might drop some frames, some audio. But yeah. So I guess I'll kind of start out with how I organize my projects. Within Ableton, you have the ability to have nested groups of things. And so for mostly organizational purposes, I kind of organize things by what they are. They're very broad. So chords, this is just where everything that have chords live. So normally this is not melodic content. It's just things that are usually more background leads for stuff that is just like playing one note at a time for the most part. This is where the vocals are. Bass, where all the bass is. There's a lot of stuff going on in here. Drums, so kick, snare, hi-hats, percussion, and SFX short for sound effects. So this is where I keep all my risers, Foley, all the sparkly stuff. And I'll save going over some more detail-oriented stuff from there. But I think what I'll do is in each part of the track kind of solo each one of these groups so you can kind of get an idea of how things are kind of split up. So for example, I'll just start by soloing the chords and I'll skip around parts of the song. You could just hear the chord elements. So things just kind of start out with chords. If I skip forward a little bit. So normally when I write, I do the intro first and it's usually kind of chords. And from there, I'll basically take and edit parts of this to use throughout the rest of the track. And so I'll kind of pick out some specific things that I think are kind of interesting here with the chord part. So I'll just solo a couple tracks so you can see individual elements. I can't remember what this is. So this is kind of a cool glitchy sound that initially started out, I think, as guitar harmonics, but I just applied a bunch of effects to it. So that way it starts out in a digital sort of crusty space and slowly transitions to the more pure. And that is kind of one of the themes I love embodying. Like I said, is that duality and that contrast going from something natural and synthetic, and embracing both. So kind of at the end, it should just be kind of the pure, more of the pure sound. Reverb, delay, all that jazz. And let's see, what is this? So this was actually just a sample. Sometimes this is from more current me, where I'm resigned to be like nothing. Not everything needs to be from scratch and crazily processed. So it's just kind of a pad that sits in the background. And same here. This is another pad I kind of cut up. So a lot of texture. And one of the parts that I love with this track is the strings, which is a sample library, just with MIDI and a bunch of effects. Again, starting from like a more digital, distorted version of themselves. and then transitioning into something a little bit more natural. I love that sound. That was a big part of the track. And let's see. Talked about the strings. Also, another sample library, which was a chorus that kind of sits in the background. Always make things more emotional and impactful or epic by just adding chorus. Again, starting distorted and digital, but opening up as you get toward the drop. So if I were to turn off all of the effects here, you can kind of hear what it sounds like by itself without all the post-processing stuff. Because I'm also automating the volume to match the syncopated rhythm of the bass that's coming in, to kind of tease what's going to come in the drop. But if I turn off all the processing, this is what we get. And I'll play the bass solo so you can kind of hear the bass transitioning from a steady note to that syncopated rhythm you hear in the drop. So here it's steady. And now we're doing that volume automation that's teasing the rhythm of the drop. And so I wanted that to also happen on the chords. So that's why I replicate that dit sound. So, this is probably going to be insane. But here it is, hand drawn in, because I am crazy. The volume automation happening where, starts out with just a little bit being reduced, but then by the end it gets you like fully basically changing the volume. So as I play those two elements solo, you'll kind of see this happening. And yeah, so you're probably starting to see why this was a crazy project to work on, because there was so much detail and automation and stuff that it was very difficult. All of the cognitive load working on this. Not trying to flex. If anything, I'm shaming myself. Like, it's a cool track and I'm really happy with where it is, but it was something that would be really difficult to do over and over and over again. But yeah, and so here's the vocals with the splice vocals that I pulled in, and it's just a lot of processing that probably isn't really doing too much other than just really compressing it. So there's like an octave down pitch and reverb and delay. So that all is happening. So that way it doesn't sound super dry in the context. It kind of sits in the mix. And yeah, totally. It is an engineering feat. And it's like, it's really fun because you're solving a problem. Like, you have all these components that you want in your track, but you have to basically fit them in somehow, whether that be in time. So it's like, the way I think of it, it's you could mush all these things together by changing where they are in time and frequency or spatially. And that is basically the art of mixing. But, obviously, as you have more elements, those are more things to fit together, and they all interact with each other. And so hence the complexity of mixing. There's like ways you can kind of get around it, but it's a fun challenge. So it's fun doing it, but it's also kind of like, well, balancing the having fun versus output versus having more tracks out, you know? So it's like, it's fun to solve problems. You can infinitely solve problems and find minutia that you want to improve. And that was kind of one of the themes of working on this track was where is good enough, and prioritizing the most obvious things first and getting other people's opinions instead of just kind of getting caught up in my own. So yeah. So yeah, there's the vocals, and here I think I do want to break down some of the sound design, dive in a little bit deeper into the detail to kind of show you things. But this is the sound that basically was within the track from the very start, which was sort of the synthesized vocal sound that's doing ooh sounds, and kind of where the melody of the track is built around. Again, starting out super digital, super broken. And this is layered with another instance that is kind of going on top of it. And now opening up. So I'll unfreeze this because I think this is a cool thing to kind of dive into the details for all of you freaks out there that love seeing sound design stuff. So, and also just because the plugin that this is made with is really cool. So I'm going to turn off all the processing, and we can just kind of hear what it sounds like by itself, which is probably going to be, yeah, we'll see. So the plugin I'm using is called Alter Ego, and I definitely recommend you folks check it out if you're a producer, because it's free. It's basically like a free Vocaloid that is not like super amazing, but if you're intentionally trying to make something that sounds like a Vocaloid that has obvious flaws, it's really cool because I'm literally doing, you can type in words for it to say, which is really cool too if you want to write lyrics or whatever. But I did the typical thing of just saying ah, ooh. So now it's just going back and forth between saying ah and ooh, because I was basic and like I love just ahs and oohs. And one of my older tracks, my other drum and bass track, I also used Alter Ego, this free Vocaloid, and I literally wrote pee pee poo poo. And that is like a huge part of the track, but it's you when you hear it, it doesn't sound like pee pee poo poo, but it's funny. And like, what's the point if you're not having fun making art? So, yeah. So, anyways, I think there are some elements of this that I'm automating. So if I turn on all of the automation lanes, so if you're not familiar with Ableton or music production, you have the ability to change the parameters of a sound over time. So let me put all of these parameters that I am automating so we can kind of see them all side by side. And if you're a producer, I feel like the key to sound design is automation. Like, sure, I have a lot of stuff here that's processing the sound, but obviously it starts somewhere super basic and static. But if you automate a lot of things, it can sound more organic and more interesting over time, and allows you to take it from a different area in the mix to somewhere else. So yeah, so I think I'm automating like vibrato and stuff of the sound, and I will turn back on the effects, and we can kind of, let me delete the ones that are off, and I can kind of go my thought process for why each one of these was added to walk you through how we got from one point to another. And that's another thing with really big projects, is you see how long it takes for things to be added or deleted. It becomes a huge slog in Ableton. It just takes forever to add a new track or add a new effect. So your workflow efficiency goes way, way down. Okay. Let's see what the deal is. So here, let me I'll turn everything off. This isn't doing anything. Nice. So that doesn't really need to be on. That's insane. I have no idea I made the EQ like that. That's kind of silly. So it is boosting that range for some reason, I guess, to fit it in the mix. So it's just boosting that harmonic a lot. Tuner, limiter, just to control dynamics, probably not doing much. Yeah, it's not doing anything. This is basically a volume automation tool that allows you to modulate the volume by like an LFO. So here's why I kind of introduce some interesting modulation to keep it varied over time. And then grain delay, which is amazing for winding sounds up. Digitalis is one of my favorite plugins that is kind of like a digital distortion, spectral sort of MP3 sound effect. I'll loop this part. And OTT, if you know, you know, it's multi-band processing preset. That's amazing. Limiter, not doing anything. Utility, changing the width of the sound. A slight reverb that gets introduced at the beginning. EQing. Mid-side EQ. Another reverb that's not doing anything. Nice. And just a compressor, I think, to... Oh, it is doing something. Just to kind of flatten out peaks a little bit. Yeah, so I figured it'd be cool to dive in deep on one sound like that. Let's see, any interesting other points within the lead stuff? Yeah, this is also Alter Ego on the drop. It's just a different processing, a slightly different timbre. This as well on the second drop, but I think I switched it to the more masculine sounding model that you can use. Actually, you can hear it over here. And I'll come back to that. And what was this? This was just a vocal sample. took a quick sample of a vocal just saying and layering it with the bass. Cool. So that kind of covers all the melodic things. I know some of y'all freaks are interested in the bass, but I'll save that for last. And let's look at the drums. So I'll just kind of focus on the drop drums, and we can just solo the drums so you can kind of hear the drums by themselves, because I think it's really fascinating just to kind of hear just the drums by themselves, because sometimes they're, you know, set in the mix in an interesting way. But yeah. I love the width of the layered clap with the snare. So this was another area I spent a lot of time. I guess if you work in Ableton, I don't know how much people have messed around with like having multiple instrument chains on the same channel. I use this as a way to layer drum samples together. So for example, this kick is not just one sample, it's actually a couple layered together. So I'll just play this kick by itself with everything. So if we solo each element at a time, this is basically the foundation of the kick. That is layered with this sort of natural, I think it's a metal kick sample. That adds more impact. And then that's layered with, I think, a hi-hat sample to kind of add more harshness, so that way it cuts through the mix a little bit more. And so all together, that makes... And I think the kick changes on the second drop, because this first kick on the first drop is really heavy and meant to be kind of more of a stomp to kind of fit the energy. But the second drop, I wanted it to be a little bit tighter to fit the mix a little bit better. So this is the second drop. So I think it's basically everything but that metal kick layer muted, which kind of adds more of the stomp sound. Yeah, of course it's going to be a Safco track if you have more than one kick and like 5 snares. So it's the same deal with the snare / clap. You can see I have a lot of automation. I've got like, I don't know how many, several different samples. And within this is actually a nested group. So within this group, there's more. But anyways, I'll just kind of break it down. There's here's the clap or / snare by itself. Oh, I love it. I love the layer of where there's a snare, but there's this tail that is wide, and I just love that. So by each element by itself, there's a couple layers to the clap. So here's just the clap sound. Oops. Here's just the clap sound. So this is the part that is coming up after the initial transient to flesh things out. And it's basically a couple of sort of Foley samples layered. So there's 3 different samples, and I'll just solo them quickly. There's 1. There's 2. It's kind of like a water sort of sound. And 3. This is more of a sort of traditional, just like recorded clap. And so the snare by itself without the clap is just this. Oh, sorry. This is actually the second layer of claps. So I guess I have a bunch of claps going on. Ignore that. The snare by itself, just kind of like a little baby snare. But by itself, it is cool, but I wanted the epicness of having this wide clap. So I'll play the track, but just playing the snare without the claps. So you can kind of hear what the claps add in the mix. So here it is, the snare by itself. It's clean, like it cuts through, but here's with the claps. I just love having that extra detail width that kind of explodes out. And just quickly on the second drop, it is layering that original fundamental snare by itself with this sort of tonal snare. So here's the snare for the second drop. You can kind of hear that bloop, bloop, which is tuned to F, the key of the song. So it's just layering this sound on top of the original snare. Sitting in the mix stereo wide. So I'll do the same thing. I'll just solo the snare without that ring in the mix and then turn it back on so you can kind of hear the before and after. And it may be too much like in the details, but for me, I love having that total snare, and I like having a variation of the snare. It's kind of like just a slight shift in expectation, and adds that extra sauce. So without the ring, I'm gonna turn the ring on. I'm just a sucker for adding that sort of layered detail. So yeah, zoom out on the level of detail there. A lot of the percussion stuff, there's nothing really crazy going on. It's really just a lot of layers of loops and samples. So I'll just kind of solo that so we can just hear just the percussion by itself. Yeah, just some loops. And to keep the energy going up, adding more layers. So now there's like a shaker added. And then the next 8 bars have a splash added. So this is a good way of keeping interest, is to just keep layering percussion. Things are opening up a little bit more and more as the track goes on to kind of follow that swell in the song. And things are slightly different. I reuse most of this for the rest of the track, but it's mostly split. And yeah, of course, Safko. It's not a Safko track if you don't have a clicking or a ticking clock sample. So that plays throughout the track as well. And you probably hear it very distinctly at the beginning, at the end. And yeah. And to kind of loop all the way back to Jasmine's question, all the way from the beginning, about the basically trying to, I guess, transition the energy levels from one part of the track to the other. Like, how do you build up tension and release tension? And that's just through having a bunch of sound effects. And so I'll just kind of play the sound effects for the last couple of bars before the drop. And so you can kind of hear what they sound like by themselves. So things just kind of building up. And actually, that was not for the drop. That was just from going one section to the other. This is for the drop, so it's a little bit more over the head. Clap in the background. And so that's kind of the release, the white noise to kind of fill out the rest of the space. So if I mute all the sound effects, we can kind of hear what is missing, and it'll be pretty apparent. Like, sure, there's a lot of other, like I'm adding reverb and high passing other elements as the drop comes, so that way they're kind of moved out of the way. There's less bass. So that does a lot of work, but the sound effects themselves, it's pretty obvious without going with or without. So here they are without. It just feels so empty. But with. You know, have that white noise, that sparkle. And these are playing throughout the whole track to kind of always have that constant noise in the background that's kind of going back and forth. It also helps
accepting what is,
like add punctuation on each phrase, where like basically every 8 bars or 16 bars, I have the swelling of energy up and kind of down like waves. And that allows you to like here, I'm leading up to the bigger bow to have the B section, the drop. And it's the same deal on the second drop. I think there's a lot more that's added in.
listen.
Just a lot of small edits, like just so you can kind of get an idea. I normally like split things up between, you know, longer transitional elements like this, where it takes like a bar or two to play. Comes up, mixed in with smaller elements that are much faster. And kind of interspersing them. So it creates like a lot of really cool moments of interest, and it's a great way to basically fill empty space. So yeah, that is like a lot of the sparkles and stuff. And so let's get into the bass. There's a lot, because there's a lot in this track, and I'll just I'll break it down piece by piece and maybe zoom in on detail on one specific thing, one or two specific things, so you can kind of get an idea of where a lot of the sauce comes from. Because when it comes to drum and bass music, people are normally like super nerdy about the bass. So the intro is, I think, just like a processed Reese bass. So it's starts like really low back in the mix, and kind of comes in very slowly. I love doing that. I love having elements that you don't even notice are introduced, because they're just slowly introduced. So pitch started high, now it's getting lower, it's getting filtered in. Now we have the full weight of the bass. It's layered with some white noise to kind of have that ear candy. And this is the element that eventually gets amplitude modulated to right here to match the syncopated rhythm of the drop. And that's like a really, really sneaky way to bridge ideas from your intro to the drop. If you have a drop that doesn't have a lot of conceptual overlap with your intro, it's a good way to kind of mix them together somehow. And that's usually can be done by teasing the drop in some manner. So that way it's not like, the drop is here and it's completely different. The rhythm is different. The texture and the sound design is different. You don't know how to dance to it. But I love kind of having that tease of it, and it's a really great way to meld ideas together. So things start from a static part in the intro, and they eventually get to follow that dotted rhythm, which gets introduced into the drop. And so this sound is really just used in the intro. It's not meant to be super the main focus or heavy. It's just a supporting element of the intro. And other parts that get teased are like the downbeat sounds, which get filtered in. Another good way to start introducing the idea of your drop and make it sound more consistent. So things are starting filtered out, smaller in the mix, and they start opening up to kind of build that energy, but never going completely open because you don't want to show your hand. So there's the downbeat sound. Very, very cool. So yeah, this is several things pulled together. The major part of the sound is essentially a sample that I took of a modular jam that I did. Let's see if, where is it? Oh wait, sorry, that's not the downbeat. That had it backwards. This is the downbeat. Yeah. So this is basically a, like I said, a sample from a modular recording I did. I actually think I can pull up the sample itself so you can kind of hear what it sounded like before. Show in browser. Show in Finder. No, I want to see. Okay, I'll just play it from off screen. This is what it sounded like dry with no effects. And then with all the effects I added and layered a new sub. Reverb that opened it out, all that jazz. There's a lot of things going on. So I'll just solo the bass and then kind of point out them as they play. We have this downbeat sound, then we have the dotted rhythm, and a couple other sort of fill sounds. So this other sound, which we hear is layered with the vocals, just kind of like a white noise bass. I love layering sort of a Reese sound with Foley to make it kind of sound wet and juicy. This sound is kind of a layer of a couple different things. We have, I think this is the primary sound. Yeah, that's sort of the base of the sound. Here's the sub. Layered with some noise, and I think this is a vocal sample. Yeah, so those all kind of come together. And this massive layer of sound that make the dotted pattern. Which is kind of the focus of the song. Everything else is just kind of going around that. So I'll dig a little bit into this because there's a lot going on, and yeah, I think it's kind of cool. So let's just listen to the elements of what makes up the sound. I think this is generally the heart of it. Yes, exactly. So I think it'll be interesting to... There's a lot going on here to walk it back to how it sounds without any effects on, because I honestly don't know. And this will kind of demonstrate a technique that I love to use a lot for all you sound design freaks. So if I turn off all the effects, it's probably going to sound completely different than what it actually does. So here we go. Yeah, that is completely different. So with all the processing on, yeah, the power of sound design. So I think what the majority of the transformational sound is vocoding the sound from a different sound, which is a technique that I love to do. So essentially this other sound, which is muted, is what I'm using to vocode the sound I just played. And I believe this sound is what imparts the tonality, because these are chords and it's probably going to be really loud and distorted. So this is what the source of the vocoding comes from. Yeah, so it is just chords. So that basically takes the chords and the tonality of that and puts it on top of the sound. And that's what's happening here at this step. So if I turn this step off, it's going to be not as tonal. Oops. Soloed the wrong thing. But when I turn on the vocoding on, it takes the tonality, and I love using vocoders in a manner that also makes the sound kind of break apart and feel kind of wet in some sense. So there's a lot of sounds and sound effects going on here that I'm not going to go into, but at some point I'd be happy to go more into detail in the future, but it's a little out of scope. But basically, I love merging different sounds together and transforming them in an interesting manner. So let me walk those changes back. So now I can reclaim some of my CPU. And so that's kind of the meat of the sound. And the supporting elements, I think it might just be the sub. Oh yeah, there's some other layers, but here's the sub, which gets layered in. It's a really, really fat sub. And for those of you who have keen ears might be hearing some distortion. That's just the sidechain. But yeah, so I'll kind of break this down because this is cool. I think there's a lot of interesting things you could do with subs. It's a couple layers. I think it's really starts with, I think, yeah, let's play and see what happens here. What this is built out of. So yeah, I think it's a first harmonic sine wave, a third harmonic sine wave, and a fifth harmonic sine wave. But the third and fifth harmonics have a unison on. So there's two voices and they're spread. The spread and detune is being modulated. And so there's also a lot of distortion on them. So if I were to turn these guys off, it'd be a lot less interesting. A lot cleaner. But I wanted to have that grit and that dirt. So late in the mixing process, I added in this distortion, which kind of comes through. It's like the type of distortion that helps your mix translate to like phone speakers or laptop speakers when you don't really have that low end, but you can apply the low end by having those really low mid harmonics. And as I'm wont to do, I love layering subs with Foley sounds. So this is like the sound of crunching eggshells. And what is this? Yeah, a log being crunched with some sound effects and stuff on it. So together, that fleshes out the sub. And together with the mid-range, there you go. Cool. So there's one other really cool thing I wanted to cover, but I'm going to have to take a quick bio break. So I'm going to let the track play through, and I should be back in about a minute or so. Yeah, I'll see you guys in a hot sec.
Accepting what is.
Word, I'm back. So there's one other thing I wanted to show, and would be happy to field any questions after that and kind of wrap things up and wind down from there. So the thing I wanted to show as a special kind of shout out to my friend Eve, when I was working on this track and like 2022, I didn't really have an idea for the second drop. And, Eve had come over because we wanted to potentially think about collaborating on some music. And so I opened up some projects and showed her a couple things. And this was one of them. And I was kind of like, oh, yeah, there's room for potentially vocals or some other instrument. And so she, took a bounce of the track and then ended up recording herself. I don't remember exactly what the instrument was, but I think it was on a keyboard or a melodica, and took a recording of herself playing on top of the track. And I took that as like a really cool source of inspiration to start working on the second drop. And I really wanted to try and integrate the sample kind of in its entirety, or basically kind of have it play out and layer it in somehow. But the Eve's performance was more kind of like a little bit in a jazzier direction, and like there's nothing wrong with that, but I was like, oh, I don't know if I can get this to fit. And there was a version of the track where I did have it as part of the outro, but I ended up wanting the outro to kind of be a little bit more desolate, but her contribution was a little bit more epic, and so it didn't really make sense to have the outro. So I wanted to show you basically the starting point that she provided me with and how I transformed it to ultimately not necessarily be the like melodic inspiration for the drop, but like a timbral inspiration for the second drop. So that being said, I will pull up her recording. And I don't know if she intended it to be used in its final, like as, oh, this is the final form of what I want to be in the track. So yeah, I'll just throw that out there. I don't know if Eve's like, oh, I'm so embarrassed that he used like a demo version or whatever, but I asked her in advance and she's like, it's cool if you share it. So yeah, here we go. That wasn't it. That was a different sample. Sorry. Here we go. Oh, let me turn off these effects. Here we go. So you can kind of hear her soloing on top of the recording. And it's really cool. And I think she recorded even more. Yeah, this part is really cool. And I love that little part where it's like that extra dissonance. And maybe this was on the talk box. I don't know. I know she had recently gotten a talk box at the time, but I really loved that. But I wasn't able to feel like I could get it to gel in the direction of the track. So I ended up building up on top of it, like creatively kind of transforming it. And so I'll walk you through the process I took for that. So basically I had the second drop and I was like, okay, I want to basically follow the same dotted rhythm of the first drop, but have a completely different timbre. And so I was like, all right, well, I want to start with some sort of melodic content that has harmonics, interesting harmonics and interesting natural timbre to it. So I started with Eve's recording and basically muted the parts where that bass wouldn't be playing. So what I'll do is I will mute everything in the track, mute everything of that bass but the sub, so you know the rhythm that it's supposed to be following, basically. So the dotted rhythm. And here we go. The CPU is starting to crap out. But anyways, I knew that's what I wanted to put in. But what is that sound going to be? So I basically muted the parts of Eve's recording where that sound wasn't going to be playing. And I knew I wanted to kind of have sort of this granular or chopped up effect. So I utilized this plugin I love called Digitalis. And hey, I'm actually wearing the merch for this company called Aberrant DSP. Go support them. They're very cool. They made this plugin. But anyways, I'm using this plugin as a way to sort of like glitch the sound. And I'm going to open the plugin. Don't freak out. It's got a lot going on in the interface. But I'm only using this time part, which is kind of like a buffer effect that like takes a snippet of audio and repeats it. So I'll turn everything off so you can kind of hear how it is without the effects first, which is just the raw recording. That wasn't it. Let me actually solo it. Let me turn off some stuff so that way I'm not dropping audio frames. There we go. And so if I turn on this buffer effect, and is actually pitching it up an octave too. So I've gotten the tone, I got a sort of rhythm. It isn't actually the same dotted eighth rhythm, but what I then did was resampled that and bounced it out. And I'll show you what I did next. We now will zoom in to where this actually is used. And I believe this is it. I'll go to the bounced version. So this is the affected version. So it's a little quiet. So I took that and time stretched it to then follow the rhythm of the sub. So now with it time stretched, if I just solo this. Oh, here we go. So it's kind of a couple steps, like the meme of like draw the horse, and you know, step one, step two, very goofy looking, and the third one is the perfect hyper realistic version of the horse. But there's a lot of effects and stuff going on. But the main idea was to take that sound, make it sound more impulsive, add some more effects to it. And I think it got bounced out a couple more times. Yeah, here we go. So let me turn off all the effects so you can kind of hear each step after I took the chopped up version. So that's kind of the chopped up version. And then I added a bunch of effects to have it more of an impact to it and have more variation in texture, as well as kind of add some stereo info. And what I think is doing a lot of the work. Go one by one. So here's the original. And I have this rec, which is 5 dispersers in a row, where they're each, I have macros for each frequency. And basically what a disperser is, it's just an all pass filter. And basically I have 5 of them stacked one by one, and I have a macro for each one of the frequency points. And so if you just stack a bunch of all passes, it kind of creates a zoom, zoom, zoom sort of sound where it makes things basically turn into lasers. If you just keep stacking them, it will turn into a laser. So the before, after. You can kind of hear that laser sound. So to demonstrate my point, what if we duplicate it and the project is so big that it takes forever to duplicate something? If we duplicate it twice, it's going to sound really goofy now. Yeah, sound like a laser, but that is what I wanted. Some distortion. And then here, I think, is where I'm kind of adding that sort of wet sound. It looks like, I don't know what I was doing here, y'all. I think the vocoder is probably doing the most of the work here. So it looks like I'm splitting it into two parallel chains with two different vocoders and delays. So here's one layer. Yeah. So I vocoded it and then Foreman shifted the vocode down so it kind of occupies the lower region. And I think this is the more of the dry sound. Yeah. I love vocoders. And distortion, soothe, just throwing the kitchen sink at it, basically. Yeah, and then so that's where things lead to kind of basically the backbone of the second drop. So there are some other things layered in, but if I mute those for now, that's how Eve's sample, her recording, was able to basically enable me to come up with a really cool sound that I use. So without all the extra sauce, I'll just have the sub and then the processed versions of Eve's recording. Very cool. And the extra layer, which I added, was, I think, some more textural stuff. Ear candy. So that was to kind of fill out the sides and flesh out the rest of the empty space. So now with that added, there we go. Cool. Yeah, so that kind of hits all of the interest points I wanted to. I know this was kind of a longer stream, but I did want to try and push myself a little bit and not only do kind of a breakdown of the project, but talk about the inspiration for the track, where it started, some of the difficulties I had with it, and kind of, in summary, you know, I don't want to have as complicated as projects moving forward. This was just kind of a project from, you know, like I had mentioned 4 years ago, that meant a lot to me. I wanted to get over the finish line. And so it was a big effort to try and mix everything together. And, you know, moving forward, I want not only there to be less complication in terms of the number of tracks, the number of details that I have in my music, but also more simpler ideas. Like this one wasn't like too out there ideas, but I could have also split the number of variations that I had and A and B sections into different songs. I could have done that. But I always like having variation in my music. So yeah, I think, yeah, that's pretty much it. So song should be out tomorrow. Please enjoy that. And yeah, I know I'm sounding like I'm wrapping up, but I did want to open it in case there are people in the chat who wanted questions. Anything specific. I didn't really talk too much about mix or technical things, sidechain, mastering, all that stuff. Happy to go into that, but I'm also happy to save that for another time, as I've been going for a bit and I don't want to keep going and going and going and going. But yeah. Anything you guys wanted to know more about? let me know. I'll sit here for a moment. And while I'm waiting, just wanted to thank you for dropping by. Appreciate it. Should be doing this every other week, whether it be DJing, writing music, organizing my DJ library, doing a modular jam. I will be here. All right, last call. Going. Gone. Word. Okay, I think that kind of does it. So thanks everyone for stopping by. Hi YouTube, hi VOD people, VOD watchers. Track should be out tomorrow. Please go stream it and plan to see you in the next every other week. I don't know what I have in stock for next week, but it might be something different. I may not be in Ableton. I might be doing something hardware or DJ related. Look forward to that. And like I mentioned at the beginning, if you wanted to kind of get involved and do something collaborative on stream, whether it be Skillshare, whether it be collaborating on a track, whether it be going back to back on a DJ set, or even if you wanted to take over yourself, like if you wanted to drive and I ask you questions, whatever. Thanks so much. So that being said, have a great night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.